The Killer Smog. In 1952, a deadly disaster in England changed our ideas about the air we breathe. Smog. Fog mixed with smoke or other pollution that hangs in the air. It was hard to see anything because of all the smog. Environmental. Having to do with the natural world. The new environmental law made it easier for people to recycle. Microscopic. Extremely small, able to be seen only through a microscope. You can't see germs because they're microscopic, but they are everywhere. Particulates. Extremely small pieces of a substance, especially one that causes pollution. All these trucks on the road are releasing harmful particulates into the air. Wheeze. Breathe loudly and with difficulty. I could hear my sick uncle wheeze from down the hall. Like so many terrible things, the dark clouds seemed to appear out of nowhere. It swept over London, England. It brought fear and death. It would kill 12,000 people. This was not a monster from a nightmare. It was not a tornado or an alien spaceship. This killer was air, a huge cloud of poisonous air. For 5 days, it covered London, causing panic and death. It became known as the Killer Smog of 1952. And it is one of the deadliest environmental disasters in history. Going dark. The Killer Smog struck on December 5, 1952. Brian Bone was 9 years old. That morning, Brian opened the back door to let out his dog, Tarzan. The air was damp and smoky. But that wasn't odd for London at that time of year. Brian shut the door and went about his day. Later, when Brian went to call the dog in, he realized something was very wrong. The air had turned black. It had a sharp smell, like chemicals and rotten eggs. Brian and his parents called for Tarzan, but the dog had escaped through an opening in the fence. Across London, everything went dark. Trains stopped on their tracks, cars crashed. Being indoors was no escape. The black air crept under doors. It filled up homes, offices, and hospitals. What was happening? Thick smog. London had always been known for its fog on chilly days. True, it made the city gloomy at times, but it was harmless. Fog is simply microscopic drops of water trapped in the air. By the 1800s, though, London had grown more crowded and modern. Pollution from factories and chimneys filled the air. Much of this pollution came from burning coal. On cold and foggy days, dirty smoke would stick to the tiny drops of water in the air. In 1905, this dark, dirty air got a name: smog. Smog wasn't a problem just in London. The early 1900s was a time of growth all over Europe and the United States. Smoke from factories and steel mills turned cities ugly. Most people thought nothing could be done to make the air cleaner. Coal was the cheapest way to heat a home. It was all most people could afford. Plus, factory owners couldn't close their factories. If they did, millions of people would lose their jobs. It seemed like smog was just a fact of city life. A true disaster. What few people knew at the time was that smog wasn't just dark and smelly. It was also dangerous. It contained chemicals and particulates, mostly specks of unburned coal. As the Bone family searched outside for Tarzan, their lungs filled with poison. Scientists didn't fully understand how smog damages the body, but there were signs that it was harmful. On smoggy days in London, school kids would wheeze as they tried to work. Emergency rooms would fill with patients having lung problems. Still, little was done to reduce air pollution until the smog of 1952. Deadly days. This smog was worse than others before it. The weather was very cold. People were burning more coal than usual to stay warm. And there was no wind to clear away the dirty air. So day after day, schools stayed closed. Workers couldn't get to their jobs. By day 3 of the fog, there was some good news at the Bone House. Tarzan had made his way home. But Brian couldn't do much to celebrate. He was sick in bed with a burning, painful cough. All around London, thousands of people were getting sick. At first, most doctors believed that people were suffering from the flu. But soon it became clear that the smog was making people sick and killing them. By the time the smog finally cleared on the 5th day, more than 4,000 people had died. In the coming months, roughly 8,000 more would die from lung damage. New laws. New laws. The Killer Smog of 1952 changed the way people thought about air pollution. Over the next 4 years, the government in England passed a new law to make air cleaner. Factories were moved outside the city. The government also helped people pay for cleaner heating systems that didn't use coal. And in 1970, the U.S. put the Clean Air Act into effect. This important law helped cut down on air pollution. Since then, there have been no killer smogs in England or America. But dirty air remains a deadly problem around the world. Beijing, China, and New Delhi, India, are often covered in smog caused by factories and cars. Many other cities are too. About 7 million people die every year from breathing dirty air. Few understand the dangers of pollution better than Brian Bone. He recovered from his illness, but throughout his life, he suffered from lung problems caused by the smog. And he always understood what a gift it was to take a deep breath of sweet, fresh air.